Reclaiming Timeless Ways. Mike Traster, Simon Fuller, welcome aboard another episode. Glad to have you along with us today. And for that matter, any of the episodes you've watched, we appreciate that very much. If you like what we're doing, please share it out to some friends. You know, a lot of what we do, Mike, just to kind of kick off this show, is just try to give useful tips, hints, life advice. Not that we're professionals by any stretch of the imagination, but have lived some life and hopefully can help you through a situation, and ultimately to make community better, to make relationship better, to make life a little easier and just helping one another, sort of a concept.
Absolutely.
So we would ask you to do that. Share this out to your friends if there's anybody that could use a little help from one of the episodes, the topics that we talk about.
Yeah.
And with that being said, another topic is at hand, Mike. Maybe another opportunity for me to learn something and our viewers.
So we talked about the 3 strands of the rope: yes, no, and maybe. And then the next one, which is barter, which is going to be based on those first 3. Who do I deal with?
Right.
How do I determine whether or not they're trustworthy and fair? Right. What's my value? Are they overestimating their value and underestimating mine, right?
Right.
So all that comes down to like survival in the sense of protecting our assets of time, money, energy, right? Knowledge. So, and the next one is literally about dealing with the unexpected, or what we would call survival.
Right.
Right? So somebody says that, and then they pause and they puff up and they raise one eyebrow and they shine their invisible badge. I have no area of expertise in that. I've studied it a reasonable amount for a number of years. I'm still a beginner.
Right.
Okay? So I want to make that really clear. There's a guy who's done a tall guy with long blonde hair, used to walk around barefoot. He has a survival school, I think in Arizona, Cody Ladine or Lundeen. Okay. And he's a pretty knowledgeable fellow. And I've seen him on TV, like at the end of his wit.
Yeah. Just
stressed out of his gourd in a survival situation. So I'm sure it would be worse for me.
Yeah.
Right? I can tell you I've been on the edge of 1,000-foot or close to 1,000-foot cliff on a ledge this wide, and my next foothold was higher than the table from the floor, and my handhold was a foot over my head, and it was a vertical wall, and I was terrified beyond words.
Can I ask why you were there to begin with, Mike?
I didn't know it was there.
I'm imagining this as you're saying it, and I'm thinking, wait a second here, that doesn't sound like any fun.
No, I mean, imagine going up the wall, which is what, 12 feet?
Right.
And being on the top of that window, that ledge on the top up there, 12 feet high.
So imagine 90 of those.
Right.
Capers.
Right.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to go down one. I could easily break my ankle or my wrist or something just 12 feet, right? We're not built to do that.
Right, right.
So yes, let's say 70 or 80 or 90 of those, bad outcome.
Yeah.
So
we wouldn't be doing a show today, Mike.
Huh?
We wouldn't be doing a show today, safe to say.
No, my name would have changed to Splat. So I had to talk to myself because I didn't like heights to begin with, to put it mildly. And so the first thing I thought was, don't look backwards over your shoulder. Don't look down. Don't look backwards over your shoulder because you're pulling your center of gravity away from the wall.
Just like when you're driving, think when you look left, you kind of veer a little bit, or look right, you veer a little bit. I mean, it's that natural. Your body goes where you're going.
Well, this was on the mountain that kills more people than any mountain in the Northeast United States. It's Mount Washington, which is 6288. It's in New Hampshire. And people go, oh, 6,000 feet, that's nothing. It kills people every year. And it has brutal, brutal weather that changes like that. And I was on the most dangerous foot trail in the eastern United States called Huntington's Ravine. And it was my first time climbing. And I went up there with a bunch of people who, including one that was supposedly a friend, none of them were really trustworthy. And they wound up getting ahead of me and letting me fall behind. And I was very tired. And so I think I actually wound up off the trail. So I wound up on this very treacherous ledge. And, obviously I made it, but so, controlling your mind and controlling your breath, controlling your position. If you're in a steep environment, you should be looking ahead, not just like your next 5 or 10 steps, but ahead at what's in the way? What are my obstacles? Where are there dangers that I can see? Is there another way around, right? It's an extremely lethal situation, and I was lucky to survive.
Right.
So the first rule is my own words, and that is everything is a tool.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
I mean, if a pen could be an airway if you had to do an emergency tracheotomy on somebody that was dying. Not that you want to, right? Before everything is a tool is the real first rule, and that is what are you going to put in your survival kit, right? And I don't remember who I heard say this, but it was a number of years ago, and they said the first thing you put in your kit, you said a knife is incredibly important, right?
Yeah.
Like, thank you gave me a little knife today. I appreciate it. So a very pretty little knife. But he said knife maybe is the most important thing in your physical pack, right?
Mike's a collector of knives, so
I
this
am.
was a fun little one. That
Yeah.
You've got some real neat stuff, but a gift, and it kind of segues into the show.
It does.
Works its way into the show.
Thank you again. So the knife is incredibly important. String or rope is incredibly important. A little sharpening stone, but you can use a rock to sharpen a knife. Rain parka of some sort,
Yeah.
right? But there's something more, shoes that fit
Sure.
and that aren't slick. They have to have grip.
Right.
If they're too tight, they're going to screw up your feet and cut them up. If they're too loose, they're going to fall off. So shoes that fit. Before any of that, even before your rain parka or a canteen to have water, no water, you're gone in 2 to 3 days, right? Is this.
Yeah.
The guy, the way he said it, if I recall properly, is the first thing you put in your survival kit is the intention to survive.
Right.
And I was like, oh,
Sounds obvious when you say it, but not that obvious until you say it.
right, right.
But it is true. The mind over matter cliche statement. If you're not, and you hear incredible amounts of stories of people who want to survive in situations, let's say cancer, and waiting to see a family, and then they go. I mean, I've heard story after story after story where people have the willpower to hang on, I guess
Right.
what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So your mind has a lot more power than maybe we ought sometimes give it credit for.
Right. So, without the intention to survive, we could go to some sporting goods store and spend $1,000
Right.
you could say, okay, I'm going to get 10 things and I'm going to spend $100 on average on each of these 10 things, so they're going to be very decent quality. Not world class, but very solid and decent, right? Without the intention to survive, they will find them next to your corpse.
Yeah.
We don't want that.
Right.
I would rather have 10 $10 items and this first item be fierce.
Yeah.
That's got to be a $200 item, the intention to survive.
Yeah.
I will stop. I will evaluate me and my surroundings and my circumstances and I will quiet my mind down and I will think about what I need to do and the order of things in which I need to do them, right?
Right.
I need food, I need shelter, I need to be in a safe place, I need to stay warm and dry, and I need water, right? And then after that comes food,
Right.
right? So in no particular list, fire. So there's a ring of keys. I got a bunch of keys on this thing. A lot of people have more than this. This might weigh a quarter of a pound, a half a pound, right? So I'm going to get a lecture from somebody. This is bad for the key slot on your car. Okay, thank you for the lecture, I know, right? So what do I got on here? I have about 10 little items that each weigh less than an ounce. There's a pair of scissors to cut things, right? Here's a fire starting tool. That's about $10. Ferrocerium rod and a little steel striker. They work. They work well. When you do it, you put the rod down on the flammable material, which has to be really thin and dry.
Yeah.
And you strike this striker down on that. I'm not going to do it in here and set my book on fire. But ferrocerium rods work.
Yeah.
For $8 to $12, this is a tenth of a survival kit or thereabouts, right? What you do is you hold the rod in the flammable material, stable, and you strike down towards the flammable material. The thinner and drier that it is, and the more airspace in it, the more, if it's really compressed, it's not going to burn very well. But
Right.
if it's fluffed up, right,
Right.
it'll burn well. So scissors. This is a little tiny screwdriver. It's got a little four-way on it from a car place. I think I've paid $1 for that. This came out of a junk store. It's like a nail file. Magnifying glass.
Sure.
Right?
Another way to start a fire, honestly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. You did it as a kid,
Oh
right?
yeah, we burned
Yeah.
the ants, chased them, being the little rapscallions.
Let's say you're hurt or you're sick and you can't scream for help. You can barely breathe.
Yeah.
That's audible,
Yeah.
right? And that was like very low pressure.
Right.
Right, so all this weighs, next to, here's a little knife sharpener and a screwdriver. I think this is like a high-end cheap tool. It's like $10 or
Right.
$12, right? So these things will keep me out of not all trouble, but a bunch,
Yeah.
right?
That'll help in a lot of situations.
Yeah, it weighs maybe 3 or 4 ounces.
Yeah.
You know, my car's 30 years old. The switch on the ignition isn't in great shape anyway. I'm not worrying about it. It's better than nothing.
Yeah.
Right? So, now, on a knife, the back edge of the knife, which is, some people call the spine of the knife, should be square. So this isn't, but I can take a file to it, and in an hour or two while I'm watching TV, if I try to remember not to stab myself too many times, I can make that square. So now I can use it, say I get a tree, and I go up above the wet line, which is where, say, the rain or the snow would
Right.
accumulate the most. Now, on the sunny side of the tree, the bark is going to be the driest.
Right.
Right? So I take the blade, the back of the blade, and I scrape down maybe onto a sheet of paper, and I just get little shavings, right? That's for fire starting called tinder, right? So that would be good for that. And now, because the back of the blade is, I've made it square, it's also good for that ferrocerium rod,
Sure.
or like that magnesium rod that you were talking about earlier. So, a light tarp, just a thin piece of maybe 10 by 10 foot plastic sheeting, could be shelter,
Oh, yeah.
right? Some people have actually gotten out of a boat, like a rowboat, and turned it upside down on the bank. And they have a roof.
Right,
It's no longer raining on them,
right.
right? Cord for tying your tarp to a tree. So maybe you have a tree and it's got a little notched branch in it. So you take a branch, you put it over it, right, and you just fold the tarp over both sides. So it kind of folds like a tent, like
Right,
that,
right.
right? Or you can see it with a rowboat or a canoe, or, or people will stack wood vertically, over a branch, a horizontal branch, and then build leaves over it, kind of like shingles,
Right.
and get 98% of the rain off of them.
Sure.
Hypothermia happens. You can get sick in 70 degrees if it's wet and windy. And I remember reading that, and I was like, they're going to say 50, right? 70. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
It will suck.
The heat right away from you with that wind and wetness, yeah.
Right. Now, you can take, for a poor guy, you can take a couple of large garbage bags, right? Like a 50-gallon garbage bag, and you can cut out the outline of a poncho, right? Front and back. So you've cut basically the same, right? You lay them up against each other, and then you lay a towel on the edge, and you take an iron with some water in it, and you heat that edge through the towel.
Right.
They weld together. So you can use that to make a poncho. And if you got like a heavy bag, like one of the ones they advertise, Hefty, it's got the little
Right,
strings in
right,
it.
right.
So the thing would actually be somewhat tear-proof.
Right.
And I've experimented with it, it works. Okay? So you just take the two pieces of plastic, you lay them against each other, line them up, cut the shape out. You have to accommodate for the thickness of your body, because your body is three-dimensional.
Right.
So it's got to be bigger than it looks. So cutting tools, and you can weld it together with an iron. Now, what if you're out in the woods? Well, you can make a fire, right, before this happens,
Right.
hopefully, and heat up a flat rock
Yep.
or a round rock, and then just roll it. Put something obviously between your hand and the rock. We have two problems. And you can use the rock to weld.
Right.
Now, I've read stories about people making a fire and putting some rocks around the fire, and then burying the rocks in the ground 3 or 4 inches under the ground, and laying their bed over that. So the ground protects them from getting burnt, but there's heat rising up out of the
Right.
ground. Have you heard of that?
It's kind of this, not exactly, but yes, that concept is not foreign. I mean, that makes logical sense, but maybe not something you'd think of if you, again, weren't putting your brain into the survival mode.
Right.
Have you ever heard of hot rock massage or any of
Yeah,
those
yeah.
types of things?
Right,
Same
right.
conceptually, and those rocks hold the heat.
Now,
I
if
think
you're-
that this brick building we're in, Mike, let me tell you what, on a hot July day in Iowa,
It cooks.
it cooks, and it's still even into the night when it cools off. This
Right.
building's still resonating heat all night, kicking
Nope.
out heat.
Yeah. And those giant Russian stoves, they build like a whole corner of the house out of massive stonework, and in the middle of it will be a fireplace. So it might take 24 hours to heat up all those stones, because it could be 4 or 5 feet thick.
Right.
But that thing will radiate heat for days.
Yeah.
You know what you're saying. So now, if you're feeling really self-destructive,
Okay.
If you want to exit stage right and they're going to maybe be gone, you might have a good 5 minutes or not to tell your last story. Go to the river and get your fire rocks out of the water. Because when the water soaks into the rock, if you put it by the fire, it will heat up and explode. So you want dry rocks. You don't want rocks that have been submerged,
Interesting.
okay? It will explode, and it will hurt. A lot. More than you can imagine.
You almost
Boom.
say that with a sense of, I'm getting the sense that maybe you've done this before, Mike. I'm listening.
No, I just heard about it. I never did it. I heard about it, and I took it seriously.
You heeded the warning.
It was like, remember the old kids from the ghetto and the old movies, and their eyes would go, oh, like that.
Yeah.
Got my attention. So a decent knife, a hatchet, and a sharpener. Now, splitting wood, the best way to split wood is with a hatchet,
Sure.
right? If you can't use a hatchet, the second best is with a knife where the blade extends from the tip all the way through the handle uninterrupted. That's called a full tang, right? So you hold the knife, and maybe you take, so let's say this is the knife, and I've put it on top of a piece of log that's vertical, and I tap it with another log, which is like a hammer, right? And I want the piece I'm splitting to be no more than 2 or 3 inches wide with a full tang. If it's a part tang, then the handle is much more likely to break, okay? So the tang is the structure of the blade that goes all the way from the tip of the knife to the butt of the handle.
Yeah.
That should be full. All right. Now with a knife like this, as I was showing you earlier, it's possible to do it, but it's more likely that you're gonna have problems. Now if you lock the knife and hammer it, there's a very good chance you're gonna break the lock, right? So what you do is you leave it folded at a 90-degree angle, and then you tap it through here, so it's not putting so much stress on the pivot
Sure.
or the lock. So meds, basic first aid. You want something to stop bleeding, like a tourniquet.
Yeah.
Some clean dressing material, pads, Band-Aids, some kind of triple antibiotic, or Neosporin, whatever. Some people have some mild skin allergies to it. Iodine is good, however, some people are allergic to iodine, and it can kill you if you're allergic to it. So hydrogen peroxide probably safer. Whatever your meds are. I think one of the most important things is you're going to go out in the wilderness, probably shouldn't go out alone unless it's a half-a-mile hike, someplace that's real ho-hum.
Yeah.
If you're really going out in the wilderness, it's best to have some company,
Yeah.
to have a plan, and for somebody to know where you're going to be.
Right.
And when they expect you to be there. And it's like, no, that's not wimpy, that's not being a baby, it's just,
Being logical.
yeah, you're intending to stay alive.
Right.
And if something happens, if you step on a rock and all of a sudden that rock slides out from under your foot and you twist your ankle real severely, you're going to have a problem getting around, So food, you have to have some food with you. Hopefully you're not going to need to hunt. That's another subject.
Yeah.
You're much more versed at that than I am.
Yeah, but even then, when that's in a situation where I have certain instruments at my use, it'd be different if I were in the wilderness and now I got to figure out how to fashion a spear or a harpoon or make a makeshift trap, where I wouldn't have the instruments that really make it more convenient.
Right. There are some little videos on like YouTube that will show you how to take a flexible branch, maybe an inch or less, say a 4-foot branch, and make it into a bow.
Sure.
And you can use that with like different kinds of cord. Um, so dry, again, dry is super important. 70, you need to maintain your body warmth.
Right.
If you get below about 95, 96 degrees, you're starting to get sick and you're at risk.
Yeah.
So they say it's better to stay warm with layers of clothes than a single garment.
Yeah.
If you have like something just plastic on the top and a bunch of clothes underneath, and there's no air going through it, you're gonna get soaked inside from your own sweat.
Right.
You know, which you may not have a choice, but you want to avoid that if you can. Water. They sell different kind of water filter systems. One of the rules basically is standing water is unsafe,
Yeah.
generally speaking. You want water that's moving.
Right.
If water can look clear and still be filthy,
Right.
right? Obviously, the less clear it is, the more questionable it is. If you
Sure.
see dead animals laying around a pond, don't drink from that.
Right.
You can't filter poison out of water.
Right.
And one of the things they will do is they will take like, say a 2-liter soda bottle and cut the bottom off and then fill it with like charcoal on the bottom and then sand and then grass.
Yeah.
So you got 3 layers of filtration. You're
Right.
going to get a lot of stuff out of there.
Right.
And then what you do is you take that filtered water and you put 2 drops of bleach per quart. And then you let it sit for 20 minutes. Or if you have a steel container, boil it,
Yeah.
you know. And I think a good rule of thumb is if you're boiling water for 3 minutes, pretty close to sea level, you're good maybe 4 or 5 minutes if you're up a couple thousand feet or more. Because the higher up you go, the lower the boiling temperature
Sure.
because of air pressure. Shoes, like I said earlier, shoes that fit
Yeah.
and shoes that have grip.
Yeah.
Spare shoelaces are a really good idea, but you can use cord.
Yeah.
If your shoelaces are torn, you can skip the first 2 holes and still, it's more important to have the top of the shoe tight than the bottom, you know. When you get down, when you're getting down off of places, you should lower yourself gently, not jump, because you will eventually hurt your knees and ankles. And I was out on a climb once with, and this one guy, he was a champion runner. He was from MIT, and he screwed his knees up. We just about had to carry him off a mountain. He wouldn't listen.
Yeah.
He was too smart to listen,
Yeah.
you know. We met a guy who had just retired. He was a park ranger. And he said the stupidest guy he ever met was a guy with a PhD. And when he met the guy was frozen solid.
Yeah.
And he was off for a day hike by himself wearing a shirt and shorts. And he knew everything was going to be fine because he just knew it.
Yeah.
So he believed it. He felt it, so it had to be true.
Yeah.
And he died from exposure, and then they found him frozen, like a popsicle, you know. And he said, that was the stupidest man I ever met. We were like, oh, okay.
So in other words, he was saying take survival serious. You just
Yeah.
don't ever know. I mean,
Right.
and again, this show might seem, you know, here we are in Northwest Iowa. We're not in a bunch of mountainous or
No.
dangerous regions. We don't have a lot of snakes or spiders or
Right.
anything that really challenges our survival in many respects. And
Right.
but if you are in these situations or going into these, because a lot of these places are destination places.
Right.
Think about that. I mean, it might seem ridiculous, but wouldn't you rather be over-prepared than
Yes.
under-prepared
Absolutely.
in one of these situations?
Right.
Because that's what this gentleman you were just referring to did. He
did.
thought he knew it. He's used to probably life that's pretty, yeah, I mean, what do you mean survival? But put himself in a situation where Mother Nature's queen. You know, you don't have houses and furnaces and warm water and clean water, you know, for bath and drinking. And refrigerator to pop open and grab a sandwich out of. It's different when you get out there, and you got to take it seriously.
There was a guy who I think was involved in search and rescue out in the desert, and he said, I don't remember if he said it was one, but I think he said it was more than one. They found some dead people over the years, and several of them had canteens with water left in them. They were trying to preserve their water, conserve it. So they did. And they died.
Yeah.
So, you need to be hydrated. It's so important. So two drops per quart. And like I said, you can have coal on the bottom, and then sand, and then
Great.
fibrous material, And so those would be a bunch of basics. That Ladine book is a great book. I've mentioned on another program the SAS Survival Manual.
Yeah, yeah.
Or the Air Force Survival Manual. I think there's an Army Survival Manual. There was another one that was made by a British officer who was also SAS. I don't remember his name. But it was a very good book. And I keep looking at articles. And I've seen a guy take two flat boards, right? So let's say you got a 2x4 and another 2x4. And he took some jute or sisal rope, right? And he roughed it up real, with the back of the knife or something. Then he rolled it and he put powder from charcoal in it. And it's dry, right? And he put it between the two boards and he starts pushing the board back and forth. So the friction between the fibers makes it very hot, right? And you can actually see, I've watched it done, I've never done it, but you can actually see smoke start pouring out of these fibers. And then he sits there and he gently blows on it until it becomes an ember. And then he'll take some other material and use it as fire starter, They say that the lint in your dryer makes great fire starter.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. And it's who would think of that? Or you can take your socks, right? And you can just very gently use the edge of your knife. So I'm going to show you with my hand, right? So obviously you want to use it in such a way that you're not going to push that into your hand. But if you do that and you scrape,
Right.
see, no pressure, right? So I'm not saying do this. I'm just saying scrape very carefully. And if this is ultra sharp, don't do it at all. But you can scrape fibers off the bottom of your socks
Right.
and use that as tinder,
Right.
right? So you look around and you say to yourself, and look, when you close a knife, my fingers are not in the path of the blade, right? And people would go, well, that's stupid. Of course they're not. When you're in a hurry or you're nervous or afraid, that's when your attention goes to hell.
Yeah.
That's when you have to take a breath and stop and ask yourself, what am I supposed to be doing here?
Right.
One thing, and I do this, I apply this rule at home. My son is Army with some advanced experience in seven tours in hard places and lots of training. But when you have, so he's grown up and he knows more than me. But the two rules are dangerous tools and kids and animals don't mix.
Yeah.
So if you're going to work with a dangerous tool, kids have to stay 5-10 feet away from you, period. And you have to get their attention, and they have to understand that's not a suggestion.
Right.
It's the law.
Right.
In terms of picking a knife, one of the knives I own is called a Garberg. It's made by a Swedish company called Mora. I think I showed it to you. It's a full tang knife, and it's about $80, $90 with the sheath. It's a very solid knife. It's not the best knife ever made, but it's a damn good knife. You could probably trust your life on that with that knife.
Right.
Of all the knives they make, they probably make 20 different knives. I think it's the best knife they make for all-around use.
Yeah.
if when you sharpen a knife, if you sharpen a knife like a bread knife and it's extremely steep, it'll cut through anything really quick, and the edge will break
Yeah.
if you're cutting hard, stuff, right? So you want a reasonable amount of steel around the edge.
Yeah.
The steeper it is, the faster it'll cut, and also the faster it'll
Sure.
fall apart.
Sure.
So you have to consider that when you're figuring out your angle. You can find an old, like if you know how some of the old red bricks in buildings are real smooth.
Mm-hmm.
That makes a beautiful surface for sharpening a knife. The roll down window on the side of your car,
Yeah.
run your fingernail across the top of that. It's rough, right? It's rough enough that you can use it to sharpen a knife. Or you can take a dinner plate and turn it upside down, and that circle where they fired it
Sure.
is rough. Perfect for sharpening a knife really well. The one thing you want to make sure when you sharpen a knife, aside from don't cut yourself, which is a good thing to not do, is you want to maintain a steady angle. So you have to move, you have to just have a discipline in the way that you move your hand so that the angle remains consistent, right? Now, are you gonna ever need these? I hope not. I hope you
Right.
never need to know any of these things. But it's good, good for us to know it, for us to share it with our significant others and our kids as they're old enough to be able to safely absorb it, And water, keep some water in your car,
Yeah. Bingo. Yeah, interesting. Again, I've not been in a situation where it's been critical to my life,
Right.
but that doesn't mean I won't ever be. And just some good things to keep in your mind if you're in a situation or going somewhere where that could become a situation.
Urine is liquid.
Yep.
If your radiator is empty and you can urinate in a bottle and put it in the radiator, it might get you out of someplace,
Yeah.
right? Things that you can use if you have a leak in a radiator, pepper. You ever heard of that?
Yeah. You mentioned it to me one
Okay.
time. You could use it to kind of
Pepper works.
fill a small leak.
Turmeric will work. I think ginger will work. Egg whites work.
Sure.
Just breaking it. If you take some tobacco out of a cigarette or a pipe or a cigar and grind it up really, really fine, throw it in the radiator, it'll expand when it hits that little tiny hole. Make it like a powder, So, and you can try those things in combination. They might get you down the road for hundreds or thousands of miles,
Far enough to get where you need to get.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So,
Sometimes you just have to be opportunistic,
Yeah.
with what you do and depend on the situation you're in.
very much so. So I think, those are some good basic ideas. Again, I would not, in my wildest dreams, think of myself or promote myself as any kind of expert, because I'm not. This is very basic information, Another thing, and this is for safety from critters, when you're climbing up or down, you want to be able to see where you're going to put your hands or your feet.
Sure.
So you're not stirring up a snake or a scorpion or,
Yeah. Now you're in a whole different set of circumstances that might not have anything on you to help you then.
maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe not, yeah. That's a whole different world. A car with a dead battery that will not start might have enough juice left in it to start 100 fires. So you can take those two connectors, right, the positive and negative, and take a wire, put the two wires together with some paper and start literally 100 fires. You can ground out a 9-volt battery or a flashlight battery with 2 wires. And it might not be enough to light or it might be to light a light, but it might be enough to make it hot,
Right.
enough to start paper burning,
Yeah.
So,
Think outside of the box.
Yeah,
You know,
very much.
you do. You got to think about those
You
situations.
do. You have to think, okay, what's around me that I can use instead of what I can't. They say this is a crazy one. I've seen it done. Take a baggie, just a clear baggie, and fill it full of water, and flex it, and aim the sun through it. Doesn't work well at midnight, and you can use it like a magnifying glass. Isn't that crazy?
I'll be darned.
Yeah. And you might be able to start a fire with a baggie full of water.
That seems counterproductive. Water starting a fire. That
Right.
would have never guessed it.
Right.
Well, check out some of these books. There's a lot more great information in them. As Mike said, just some basics. Hopefully you got something out of them, and hopefully you'll never have to use them. But either way, we appreciate you filing them away in the memory bank and watching our show today. And we'll wrap up another episode of Reclaiming Timeless Ways, and we wish you a great day.
Take care.